It was a cold and quiet night on the military base, the kind of night where everything seemed still and forgotten. Soldiers went about their duties in silence, their boots echoing in the empty corridors. Among them was Sergeant Mark Davis, a soldier known for his calm demeanor and unshakable resolve. He had seen war, fear, and death, but nothing like this. Tonight, he was about to face something no one had expected. In the center of the base, there was a large, fortified cage. Inside, a creature of alien origin stirred restlessly. She had been brought to Earth as a prisoner of war, captured during a battle between her people and the human forces. Her species, known for their strength and intelligence, were feared across the galaxy, but this one. She was different. Her name was Kara, and she was as fierce as she was beautiful, with silver skin that shimmered under the dim lights and eyes that burned with a fiery rage. She had been chained, her wrists bound tightly to the bars of the cage, yet she struggled with all her might. Her strength was terrifying, and her anger even more so. The moment she saw anyone approach, she would hiss and snarl, her sharp teeth bared in warning. Sergeant Davis had been briefed about the alien prisoner. He knew she was dangerous, that she had a reputation for attacking anyone who came near her, but he wasn't afraid. He had seen things that would make most men tremble, but fear was something he had left behind on the battlefield. He was a soldier, and this was his mission. As he walked down the long hallway, the sound of his footsteps echoed in the stillness. He didn't need to be told twice. He knew what he had to do. The others had warned him not to approach her, to wait for reinforcements. But Mark didn't listen. There was something about Kara that intrigued him. He had heard stories, rumors of her strength and her anger, but he wondered if there was more to her than just the wild, unpredictable creature everyone believed her to be. He reached the cage, his heart steady in his chest. Kara was watching him, her sharp eyes following his every move. Her breathing was shallow, but her gaze never wavered. She was sizing him up, trying to figure out what he would do next. Mark stopped in front of the cage, not saying a word. He didn't need to speak. He had learned long ago that silence often spoke louder than words. For a moment, the two of them simply stared at each other. The tension in the air was thick, the only sound the hum of the lights overhead. Kara's eyes narrowed as she studied him, her muscles tense beneath her silver skin. She was waiting for him to make a move, to do something that would give her the opportunity to escape or attack, but Mark didn't flinch. He stood tall, his eyes calm, his hands at his sides. He knew that any sudden movement might provoke her, and he wasn't going to make the first mistake. The silence stretched on. But then, without warning, Kara lunged forward, rattling the cage with a deafening crash. Her chains clinked and shook as she slammed her body against the bars. She snarled, her eyes wide with fury. The soldier didn't flinch, but his heart skipped a beat. "You want to fight me?" Mark's voice was steady, though his pulse raced. "I'm not your enemy, not today." Kara hissed again, her teeth flashing in the low light. She had no interest in listening. Her fury was all-consuming, and she didn't trust anyone, not even this human soldier standing in front of her. She had been chained, captured, and forced into a cage like an animal. To her, this human represented the same oppression she had fought against all her life. With a burst of strength, Kara tried to lunge at him again, but her chains held her back. The soldier stepped forward, his gaze unshaken. "You're angry." "I get it," Mark said, his voice low and soothing. "But this is not the way." Kara froze for a moment, her eyes flashing with confusion. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Most people were afraid of her, terrified of her strength and her wrath. They kept their distance, treating her like a beast. But this man, this soldier, didn't seem to be scared. In fact, he almost seemed calm, even in the face of her rage. It made her pause. Why wasn't he afraid? Mark didn't wait for an answer. He moved a step closer, his gaze steady on her. I'm not here to hurt you, Kara, he said, his voice firm. But I won't let you destroy yourself either. Her confusion deepened. This human was different, and for the first time, she wasn't sure how to respond. She had fought in wars, had seen her people lose everything, and yet, this human was standing here, not as an enemy, but as someone who seemed to want to help. Kara growled softly, her mind swirling with questions. She didn't trust him. She couldn't, but there was something about his presence, something about his calm that made her feel uncertain. The soldier didn't retreat. Instead, he stayed where he was, watching her every move, waiting for her to make the next one. The minutes stretched on, neither of them willing to break the silence. The human soldier had made his first move, and now it was Kara's turn. Would she strike? Or would she listen? The cage rattled again as she shifted, her anger still simmering beneath the surface. She wasn't ready to give in, not yet. But something had changed. The human wasn't like the others. And for the first time, Kara wondered if maybe, just maybe, there was more to this story than she had expected. Kara's heart pounded in her chest, a rhythm of pure fury. She couldn't understand it. How could this human be so calm? He was standing right there, inches away from her, and still. He wasn't afraid. Her claws scraped the metal bars of the cage, a sound that echoed through the otherwise silent hallway. Her body was tense, every muscle aching to leap at him, to sink her teeth into his flesh. But she hesitated. There was something about him, something in his eyes, that made her question her instincts. The human Sergeant Mark Davis stood as still as a statue. His posture was firm, his face unreadable. He had seen many battles, many foes, but none like Kara. This wasn't a fight he could win with sheer strength. No, this would be different. He had to use his mind, his patience. You're stronger than me, Mark said calmly, breaking the silence. His voice wasn't threatening, but it carried a certain gravity. But that doesn't mean you have to be reckless. Kara's eyes narrowed. She had been chained, caged, forced to endure humiliation for far too long. How dare he talk to her like she was just some child needing to be disciplined? She growled, her chest heaving with the anger that surged through her. With a sudden burst of energy, she lunged forward, her entire body crashing into the cage. Rattling the bars with a deafening sound, Mark didn't flinch. His eyes never left hers. "Stop," he ordered, his voice soft yet commanding. Kara's movements froze for a moment, as if his words had cut through the storm in her mind. She stepped back, confusion flickering across her face. This wasn't what she was used to. She was used to fear, to soldiers trembling when they saw her coming. But this one, he wasn't scared. He wasn't even angry. Her mind raced. Was it possible that this human was not like the others? Was he testing her? No, that was foolish. She wouldn't be tricked so easily. Still, there was something unsettling about him. Something that made her stop, even if only for a moment. "You're not like the others, are you?" She hissed, her voice full of disbelief. Mark didn't respond immediately. Instead, he took a slow, deliberate step closer to the cage. "I don't want to fight you," he said quietly, his gaze softening just a fraction. "I don't want to hurt you. But if you keep pushing me, if you keep testing me like this, it'll only end badly for both of us." Kara's breathing was heavy, the words twisting in her mind. She could feel the weight of his gaze, almost as if he could see through the fury that clouded her thoughts. It irritated her. It scared her. She wasn't used to someone seeing past the anger, past the rage she wore like armor. She took another step back, her tail flicking in agitation. She had always been in control, always been the one who struck first. But now, with this human, she was uncertain. "What do you want from me?" she demanded, her voice shaking slightly. Mark's answer came slowly, with a quiet authority that Kara couldn't quite shake off. "I want you to stop hurting yourself. You're angry, and I get it. But if you let that anger control you, you'll only destroy yourself. She growled again, but this time it wasn't from pure rage. No, it was from something else, a flicker of doubt, of confusion. The soldier's words had lodged themselves somewhere deep inside her. They didn't make sense, but they made her question everything. She had always fought back, had always resisted, but now she was faced with a choice. Kara knew one thing for sure. She didn't trust this human. But there was something about him that made her want to. Mark watched her carefully, his gaze never wavering. He had seen that look before, eyes filled with pain, confusion, and defiance. He had been there himself at the edge of his own breaking point, but now wasn't the time for his past struggles. Now was about her. "Please," Mark said softly, stepping closer still. "I'm not going to hurt you. But if you keep trying to escape, you'll only hurt yourself. I'm here to help, not to punish." His words hung in the air, and for a brief moment, Kara wasn't sure whether she wanted to listen to him or tear him apart. But something inside her cracked, just slightly. It was the faintest crack, barely noticeable. But it was there. Asterisk. Her mind was a battlefield, torn between the instinct to lash out and the strange pull to listen, to trust him. She had been through so much, so many wars, so many betrayals, that trusting anyone felt impossible. But this human, his calmness, his patience, it was unlike anything she had encountered before. She looked down at the chains that held her in place. The metal was cold, unyielding. But the real restraint wasn't physical. It was the storm of emotions inside her, the battle between what she had been taught to believe and what this human was showing her. Mark took another step forward, his presence strong but not threatening. "You're not alone, Kara. You don't have to fight anymore." Kara's heart raced. She felt something shift within her, something raw and powerful. It wasn't weakness. It wasn't surrender. It was vulnerability, and it terrified her. She wanted to fight. She wanted to prove that she was stronger, that she couldn't be tamed. But deep down, she knew that this human wasn't like the others. And maybe, just maybe, he wasn't trying to break her. Kara took a deep breath, her claws digging into the bars. She couldn't let go of the anger, not yet. But a seed of doubt had been planted. And it was enough to make her pause. "I'm not done with you yet, human," she snarled, but there was a hint of uncertainty in her voice. Mark nodded, his eyes steady. "And I'm not done with you either, but I won't force you. You'll come around in your own time." For the first time, Kara wasn't sure if she believed him. But there was one thing she knew for certain. This wasn't the end of their story. It was only the beginning. Kara paced back and forth in her cage, her eyes never leaving the soldier who had dared to speak to her as if she were an equal. Her body still hummed with restless energy, her every muscle itching for release. The chains that held her in place clinked with each step, a constant reminder of her captivity. But it wasn't just the chains that held her now. It was something else, the strange, unexplainable tension that hung in the air between her and this human. The soldier had not attacked. He had not screamed at her, nor had he shown fear. For the first time, Kara began to wonder if maybe there was more to him than just another human soldier. But that thought was dangerous. She couldn't afford to trust anyone, not again. Not after everything she had been through. The cage rattled suddenly, breaking her thoughts. Mark stepped closer, his eyes calm and unreadable. He had been observing her, his stance steady, not giving an inch. She glared at him, her chest rising and falling with each sharp breath. "Enough of this," she hissed, her voice low and filled with defiance. "If you want me to stop fighting, then what do you want in return? Why should I listen to you?" Mark didn't hesitate. "I'm giving you a choice," he said, his voice measured but firm. "A chance to prove that you can control yourself. That you're more than just your anger." Kara let out a bitter laugh, a sharp sound that echoed off the walls. Control. Myself, she spat. You think I can just turn it off like a switch? You don't know anything about me. I don't need to know everything, Mark replied calmly. I only need to know that you're capable of something more than destruction. But I'm not going to pretend that you'll change overnight. Kara's eyes narrowed. There was a challenge in his voice, something that sparked the fire in her blood. She had been trained to fight, to survive, and now this human was telling her to surrender her rage. But something in his words struck a chord with her, something she hadn't expected. Why? She asked, her voice softer this time, but filled with suspicion. Why would you care whether I control myself or not? You're just a soldier. Your job is to subdue me, not to lecture me. Mark took another step forward, his eyes unwavering. Because I see something in you, he said simply. You're not just some beast in a cage. You're a warrior. And a warrior doesn't need to be chained by their anger. A true warrior controls their rage, not the other way around. Kara froze. The words cut through her, and for the briefest moment, she found herself unable to speak. She had spent her life being a warrior, fighting for her people, for survival. But in that moment, Mark's words made her question everything. Could she really control her anger? Could she fight without destroying everything in her path? Her instinct screamed at her to lash out, to reject the idea completely. But the seed of doubt had already been planted, and it gnawed at her insides. You think I can just stop being who I am? She asked, her voice shaking with a mixture of disbelief and frustration. You think I can forget everything I've been through, everything I've fought for? Mark nodded slowly, his gaze steady. No, I don't think you can forget. But I think you can change. You don't have to keep living in the shadow of your anger. Kara's claws dug into the metal bars of the cage, the cold steel biting into her skin. She was caught between two worlds, the world she had known, the world where rage and violence were the only means of survival, and this strange new world, where a human soldier was asking her to do the unthinkable, to control herself. Fine, she growled, her voice low and dangerous. I'll play your game, but know this, human, I don't trust you. I don't trust anyone. Mark didn't flinch. That's all right. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to trust yourself. Something shifted in Kara's chest. It wasn't enough to make her lower her guard, but it was enough to make her stop and think. She had been alone for so long, fighting battles that no one else could understand, that no one else cared about. But now, here was a human who wasn't afraid of her. A human who wasn't looking to destroy her. And for reasons she couldn't explain, it felt different. The challenge had been issued, and now Kara was left to decide. Would she continue down the path of destruction and anger, or would she rise to the challenge and prove to herself that she was more than just a weapon of war? As the seconds ticked by, the tension between them grew thicker. The silence stretched on, neither of them willing to break it first. Mark was waiting for her decision, and Kara was waiting for something else. Finally she spoke, her voice a low growl. You think I'm weak? You think you can break me with your words? She stepped forward, her eyes burning with defiance. Let's see if you can handle the real me. Mark didn't flinch. He was ready, and Kara was ready to prove him wrong. Asterisk. The days blurred together for Kara. Each one felt like a battle against herself, against the strange pull the human soldier had over her, and most of all, against the growing confusion that stirred within her. She had spent her life fighting for survival, for her people, for vengeance. But now she was faced with something entirely new, something terrifying. Mark Davis hadn't tried to break her. He hadn't tried to force her into submission, the way others would have. Instead, he had been patient, gentle even, and that was what frightened her the most. There was a quiet strength in him, something that made her pause every time she thought about attacking him. She couldn't explain it, but it unsettled her. The soldier hadn't given her much freedom. She was still caged, still chained. But he had stopped trying to overpower her. Instead, he spent his days talking to her, quietly, persistently, trying to understand her. At first, Kira had ignored him, refusing to engage. What was the point? Humans didn't understand her, didn't understand her rage, her hunger for justice. But slowly, she began to listen. His words, though simple, were unlike anything she had ever heard before. You have to let go of the past. Mark had told her the day before, his voice steady, though he knew it was a difficult request. I'm not asking you to forget, Kara. Just ... Not to let it control you. She had sneered at him then, but in the quiet moments afterward, his words lingered, like an echo she couldn't shake off. The human soldier was trying to teach her something about control, about power. But Kara didn't know if she was ready to listen. Could she ever let go of the anger that had defined her for so long? Today, she found herself standing at the bars of her cage once again, staring at him as he worked nearby. He was methodical, calm, and focused on a task she couldn't understand. For the first time, she allowed herself to observe him without hatred, without the usual contempt she reserved for those who caged her kind. There was something about his presence that had begun to chip away at her resolve, even if she hated to admit it. Mark glanced up from his work, catching her gaze. His eyes were still calm, still steady, as though he was waiting for something, waiting for her to make the next move, to show him that she was more than just a violent, caged animal. He didn't speak, but Kara saw the glimmer of patience in his eyes. I'm not your enemy, Kara, he said softly, breaking the silence. I know you think I am, but I'm not. Her eyes flickered with irritation. You think you know me, human? She hissed, her voice low and sharp. You think you can just walk in and change everything? My people died. My planet was destroyed. What do you know of loss, of pain? Mark didn't flinch. I know what it feels like to lose someone, he said. Simply, I know what it's like to fight and to wonder if it's all worth it. But I also know that staying angry forever only drags you down. Kara's claws dug into the bars again, her body tense, her chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. She wanted to lash out at him, to strike him down with her rage. But something held her back, something that she couldn't quite explain. She was struggling, fighting against herself, against the idea that maybe, just maybe, he was right. She had been alone for so long, alone in the vastness of space, alone in the aftermath of war. Anger had been her constant companion, her only friend. She had convinced herself that it was the only way to survive. But now this human soldier was offering her something else. Something fragile, something that could break her trust. I'm not like you, she said quietly, the words coming out with more force than she intended. I don't have the luxury of peace. My people ... they don't get to rest. Not until I make sure no one else suffers the way we did. Mark's gaze softened, but his voice remained firm. I'm not asking you to forget your past, Kara. I'm asking you to make a choice. To take control of your future instead of letting the past control you. The words struck her like a hammer. She wanted to fight them, to shout at him, to dismiss them as naive human nonsense. But she couldn't. Deep down, she knew he was right. She had spent so long holding on to her hatred, her pain, that it had become a part of her. But now, for the first time, she was faced with the possibility of letting it go. It terrified her. Mark stood, slowly approaching the cage, his eyes never leaving hers. He wasn't afraid of her, that much was clear. And for some reason, that fact made her feel more vulnerable than anything else. Kara, he said gently, I'm not going to force you to change. But I am offering you a chance. A chance to stop living in the past, to take control of your own life, your own future. Will you take it? Kara stared at him, her mind whirling. He was offering her something she had never considered before. It wasn't vengeance. It wasn't War. It wasn't the endless cycle of destruction she had always known. No, it was something else, something dangerous. Something that could change everything. But could she let go? Could she trust this human enough to take that first step toward something new? For the first time, Kara felt a flicker of hope. That maybe there was another way. She took a slow, shaky breath, her eyes never leaving Mark's. "I don't know if I can," she said, her voice quieter now. "But maybe I'll try." The days had passed in a strange, quiet rhythm, each one marked by subtle shifts in Kara's behavior. She was no longer the animalistic force of rage that had arrived on the human base. Her movements were more measured, more deliberate. Yet, every time she thought she might understand this strange human, Sergeant Mark Davis, something happened that brought her back to the chaos in her mind. But there was something different now, something that had begun to gnaw at the edges of her hardened heart. It was late in the afternoon when Kara found herself pacing the small confines of her cage again, her mind a storm of conflicting thoughts. The anger still simmered beneath the surface, but there was something else now, something that felt almost like doubt. It terrified her. Mark had been quiet today, his usual calm demeanor taking on a contemplative edge. He had said less to her, choosing instead to observe her. Kara knew he was waiting for her to make the next move, waiting for her to show him that she could, in fact, control herself. But Kara wasn't sure if she was ready for that. A sharp sound broke her thoughts, footsteps approaching her cage. She whirled, her muscles tensing in preparation for whatever threat might be approaching. But it was just Mark. He stood outside her cage, watching her with those calm, knowing eyes. "You're quiet today," Kara said, her voice dripping with suspicion. "What's your game, human? Trying to lull me into some false sense of peace?" Mark didn't flinch, his eyes softened. "No game, Kara. I'm just trying to give you space to figure things out." She snorted, her tail flicking with irritation. "Space? You've caged me, human. You've taken away everything that makes me who I am, and now you want to give me space? I don't need your pity." Mark's expression remained unchanged, though there was a flicker of something in his eyes, something akin to understanding, or maybe it was sympathy. But Kara didn't need that. She didn't want sympathy. Not from him, not from anyone. She took a step toward the bars of her cage, her eyes narrowing. "You think you're special, don't you? You think you're the only one who sees through. Me, I'm not some project you can fix. I don't need to be saved." Mark's voice was steady as he responded. "I don't think I'm special, Kara. I don't think I can fix you. But I do believe you can fix yourself. And if you let me, I'll help you." His words hit her like a slap, harder than anything she'd ever felt. For a moment, the wall she had carefully built around herself cracked, just slightly. She didn't want to admit it, but the thought of trusting him, of letting herself be vulnerable, felt strangely inviting. "I don't know how," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Mark's eyes softened, and for the first time, Kara saw something she hadn't expected: genuine compassion, not pity. He didn't say anything at first. He simply stepped forward, closer to the cage, his presence filling the space with a warmth she couldn't ignore. "You don't have to know how," he said, his voice gentle. "You just have to start trying. You've already taken the first step, Kara. You're not the monster you think you are. You're a survivor. You can be more than just the anger inside you." Kara recoiled as if his words physically hurt her. She had spent so long convincing herself that her anger was the only thing keeping her alive. It was the only thing that had ever been real in her life. But now, with Mark's presence in front of her, she couldn't deny the quiet truth beneath his words. Maybe she didn't have to carry this weight alone anymore. Maybe she didn't have to be angry all the time. Tears she hadn't known she was holding back suddenly stung the corners of her eyes. She blinked them away quickly, as if doing so would make her appear stronger, more in control. But it was too late. The dam had cracked and something inside her had shifted. She was no longer the same alien who had walked into this cage. "I don't know if I can do this," she said, the words sounding foreign on her tongue. "I don't know how to let go of all the rage, all the pain." Mark's expression softened even further, and he reached out, though he didn't touch the bars of the cage. "You don't have to do it alone, Kara. That's what I'm here for. I'll help you, even if you don't believe it yet." For the first time in as long as she could remember, Kara didn't feel the need to fight. The fire inside her still burned fiercely, but now it was more like a flickering flame, one that could be controlled, one that could be nurtured rather than consumed by. And as she stared at Mark, standing outside her cage, she realized that she had a choice. She could keep fighting, keep pushing everyone away, or she could step into the unknown, step into something different, something softer. "I don't know if I can trust you," Kara admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But maybe I can try." Mark's lips twitched into a small, understanding smile. "That's all I'm asking for, a try." And in that moment, Kara felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. It wasn't strong, not yet, but it was there, like the smallest of seeds buried deep within her. It wasn't the answer to everything, but it was a beginning that terrified her more than anything. Asterisk. The days had passed in a strange, quiet calm. Kara's usual fire, the one that drove her every action, was now more like a slow burn flickering just below the surface, threatening to surge forward with the slightest provocation. She had tried to listen to Mark. She had tried to understand his words, the way he spoke to her, as if she weren't just a weapon of destruction, but a person capable of more. But that didn't mean she was ready to let go of everything she had been. Old habits die hard, after all. Today, however, something was different. Kara stood in her cage, staring out at the human soldier who was busy with his usual tasks, his back turned at her. For a moment, she simply watched him, trying to decide what to do. She had grown used to the sound of his voice, his calm demeanor, but something in the air today felt off. Tension buzzed beneath the stillness of the room, like the calm before a storm. Mark must have sensed it too, for when he turned and saw her watching him, his expression tightened, ever so slightly. His gaze flickered to the door behind her cage, where the faintest sound of footsteps could be heard approaching. More soldiers, more eyes. She could feel the change in the air, the pressure, as if they were waiting for something to happen. Kara's instincts screamed at her, warning her to act now. She didn't know why, but she felt the need to act first, to reclaim control, to prove to herself that she wasn't just some helpless creature in a cage. Before she even realized what she was doing, Kara lunged at the bars, her claws striking out in frustration. The noise was sharp, violent, a sudden crash that echoed off the walls. Mark's reaction was immediate, his eyes wide with surprise, but his feet didn't move. He didn't back away. He didn't flinch. "You're testing me again," Mark said, his voice calm but firm, like a teacher dealing with a misbehaving student. Kara's breath came out in heavy gasps. She had done it again. She had let the anger take over. She had let it control her. She stood there, chest heaving, her claws still extended, her body tense with the aftershock of the outburst. She wanted to scream, to tear everything apart, but somewhere deep down, there was a whisper of something else, a sense of shame perhaps. Mark didn't move at first, just watching her. But when he spoke again, his voice had changed. It wasn't the soft tone he usually used, the one that tried to soothe her. It wasn't even the gentle guidance he had offered in the past. No, this time, his voice held something new, authority. "Kara," he said, stepping closer to the cage, his eyes unyielding. "I told you once that you had a choice. You don't have to live in this rage, but you do have to make the choice to control it. You can't keep testing me and expect things to change." The words hit her like a thunderclap. Her mind spun, the rage still clouding her thoughts. But something inside her shifted. This wasn't the usual fight she was used to. This wasn't a battle she could win with strength alone. Mark wasn't trying to break her spirit. He was challenging her to break free from her own chains. The silence stretched between them, thick with tension. For the first time in days, Kara didn't know what to do. She didn't want to lose control again, not in front of him. Not after everything they had been through, but she was afraid. Afraid of the anger that threatened to swallow her whole. Afraid of what would happen if she couldn't control it. And afraid of what it would mean to truly let go of the only thing that had ever kept her going. Mark took another step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. Kara, you don't have to be alone in this, but you have to decide. Are you going to fight with me or against me? Her heart pounded in her chest, the sound of it deafening in her ears. She had been fighting her whole life, fighting for survival, for her people, for vengeance. But this was different. This wasn't about fighting for the past. This was about fighting for something she couldn't see yet. Fighting for a future she wasn't sure she wanted, but one that Mark seemed determined to offer her. She took a slow, shaky breath. Her claws retracted, but the anger remained, simmering just beneath the surface. She knew she wasn't ready to let go of it completely, not yet. But could she try? Could she allow herself to feel something other than rage? Could she trust Mark enough to take the first step? For a long moment, she stared at him, trying to understand what he was asking of her. She had never been good at trusting anyone, especially not a human. But this soldier had done something no one else had ever done. He had seen through her walls. He had seen her not as an enemy, but as a person. A person capable of more than just destruction. You're asking me to change everything I am, Kara whispered, her voice barely audible. How can I just change? Mark didn't answer immediately. He didn't need to. The answer was in his eyes, in the way he stood there, offering her not answers, but a choice. You don't have to change everything at once, he said softly. You just have to start. One step at a time. Kara felt something inside her crack. It wasn't a physical breaking, not like the usual explosion of rage that she could unleash with a single thought. No, this was different. It was more like the cracking of a frozen surface, the first hint of spring after a long, brutal winter. Maybe she didn't have to destroy everything to survive. Maybe, just maybe, there was another way. With a shaky exhale she nodded, her voice barely a whisper. I'll try. I'll try to trust you. Mark's eyes softened, and for the first time since they had met, Kara saw something in him that wasn't just pity or compassion. It was something deeper. Something that felt almost like hope. Asterisk. The air in the room felt thick with unspoken words, like the calm before a storm. Kara stood in her cage, her hands wrapped around the bars, eyes fixed on Mark. Something had shifted between them, a delicate balance of understanding, one that neither of them could ignore. The tension that had filled the air for days now seemed to settle into a strange, quiet peace. But peace, Kara knew, was never meant to last. Not for her. Not for someone like her. The anger still bubbled within her, coiling like a serpent beneath her skin. It was there, just beneath the surface, waiting for the slightest crack to break through. But for the first time in days, Kara didn't feel consumed by it. She didn't feel the need to lash out, to destroy. She felt something else, something that felt like a seed, fragile and small, but growing. Mark stood just outside her cage, his arms crossed as he watched her. He had been patient, understanding, even when Kara had fought him every step of the way. But now, something had changed in him too. He wasn't standing there as just a soldier anymore. He was standing as someone who had seen her struggle, her pain, and had quietly chosen to help her rise above it. To help her see that there was more to her than just rage. Kara, Mark's voice broke the silence, his tone steady and firm. You've made it this far, but the real test is coming. Can you control your anger, or will it control you? Kara's eyes flickered, her heart racing. She had been waiting for this moment, the moment when she would have to face the truth. Could she truly change? Could she truly be more than the fury that had defined her life for so long? She stepped away from the bars, turning her back to him, her tail flicking in agitation. She was tired of fighting, tired of feeling like she had to prove something. But the weight of Mark's words hung heavy in the air. For a long time she had believed that anger was the only way to survive, that it was the only thing that could protect her from a world that had never cared about her people, her pain. But Mark had shown her another way, a way that didn't require destruction, a way that allowed her to feel more than just rage. But the question remained, could she really embrace it? Could she choose peace over violence? Mark's voice broke through her spiraling thoughts. It's not about being perfect, Kara. It's about choosing something better than the darkness that has controlled you. Her chest tightened, the words sinking deep into her. He wasn't asking for perfection. He wasn't asking her to be something she wasn't. He was asking her to try, to choose something other than the rage that had always been her shield, her sword, her prison. The silence between them stretched, but Kara no longer felt the need to fill it with anger. Instead, she closed her eyes, taking a long, steady breath. Her mind flashed with images of her planet, of her people, of the battles she had fought, the ones she had lost. The anger had been a constant companion in those moments. But what if she could leave that behind? What if she could finally let go of the weight that had crushed her soul for so long? When she opened her eyes, they were clear, free from the cloud of rage that had so often obscured her vision. She turned to face Mark, her expression steady, though her heart still beat erratically in her chest. I don't know if I can ever fully let go of the anger, she admitted, her voice low but steady, but I'm willing to try. Mark's eyes softened, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. That's all I'm asking for, Kara. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to choose. Kara's muscles relaxed, the tension she had carried for so long slowly melting away. She didn't have all the answers. She didn't even know if she could truly change. But for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like she had to fight alone. For the first time, she felt like she had a choice. The final lesson wasn't in overcoming her past. It wasn't in wiping away the anger or the pain. It was in acknowledging them and still choosing to move forward. It was in recognizing that she didn't have to be defined by the battles she had fought. She could define herself, and she could choose to be something more. Kara stepped forward, the chains that had once bound her in physical restraint, now no longer as important. She reached out, her hand stopping just short of the bars, not in defiance, but in acceptance. I'm ready, she said softly, her voice strong, but with a hint of vulnerability. I'm ready to try. Mark reached out, his hand brushing the bars, where hers had stopped. He didn't touch her, but the gesture spoke volumes. There was no need for words. In that moment, they both understood. Kara had chosen to fight for herself, for something more than just survival. She had chosen a future that wasn't dictated by anger. And in that choice, she had found her freedom.